Fast Forward 289. Welcome back. I'm Larry. Tonight we're going to be working on my 351 Cleveland, and we're going to be installing the rod bearings and checking our clearances. This is my layout here. So I went ahead and installed all these bearings and torqued them down to the specs in which they are supposed to be torqued at. And checked the clearances on them with my bore mic and then my dial caliper. And I also checked the journal itself. So I'm gonna show you how to do that on the last one, number 8. The rest of these all checked out good. They're all within a 2/1000th of oil clearance, which is perfectly fine. So let's go ahead and check the last one and see what it turns out to be. So what I always do is I'll take me a little bit of carburetor cleaner or brake cleaner, put it on a rag, and I just wipe down the surfaces and also make sure these surfaces are clean, because if there's junk in here, when you go to torque it down, it might not set the seat all the way properly together like it's supposed to. So I always clean both of those sections down with some carburetor cleaner, and then take a clean dry towel and wipe them back down again. And now we can install the bearings. So what I'm using is sealed power bearings. There's the part number on them. And these are standard size bearings. And even though they're new bearings and it's not necessary probably, I still always take me a clean rag and just wipe them down. And then we can install them. So again, you want to line your tab up just like you do with the crank. Line the tab up, push them in, and make sure they're flat on each side. And then look at it and make sure that they're even. When you compress the cap, it will sit them all the way down, but you just want to make sure that that tab is lined up in there. And one thing to know is I was today years old when I learned that sometimes they do have a top and bottom bearing for rod bearings. And how you'll know is, so there's this like chamfer in the rod. So it does matter which way the rod is installed on the piston. That's why if you were going to put the pistons in backwards, cause they say it gives you better performance or whatever, but you have to take the piston off the rod, turn it around backwards, and then put it back on. You can't just flip the rod around in the block, because you have this chamfer in here, and you have a little bit on this side, but it's not as prominent as it is on this side. And that's because this is where it sets up against the crank, where like the counterweight would be. And so in other words, this is where the other rod was set up against, and this is where the end of the crankshaft was set up. So, and that's to clear that crank journal. And sometimes the bearings are made with a recess or chamfer on the side. These don't. I've already checked them. I took a bearing out of both packs, because you get 2 of these in the box. I took 1 bearing out of each side and put in here and checked to make sure. And it don't matter. It looks the exact same way no matter what you do. So for this, it doesn't matter. They go in the same way no matter what. Now when you install these, you want to make sure your 2 numbers line up. So in this case, it's rod number 8, so we need cap number 8. And as well, you can also see, you want to line up your mark. With the mark, you can see where the old mark was, where it was put together before. And also on there where the old mark was, because they're not aligned. So they're offset. So put this in there. And you can see what I mean, how they're offset. So, and then if you look at this rod, which this one isn't too bad, but you see how they're a little bit offset. They're not exactly lined up. That's not important. It doesn't matter. But sometimes if you do have a bearing that does have a top and bottom, it will be offset too far. So you got to make sure you watch for that. Now we can put the nuts on here. We're going to torque this down to the spec in which they need to be torqued down as if they were in the engine on the crankshaft. And then we will check the clearances. We're at the back of the engine block. Since this is piston number 8, we got to check the number 8 spot on the journal. Now it should be the same, but I check them individually. So this is where 7 would be, this is where 8 would be. So if I'm checking 7, I would check up closer to the front here, and then for 8, obviously I'm going to check closer to the back, right about in the center of where the crank or the rod would ride. We're going to wipe down our journal. We want to get a measurement in here as to what size it is. And then rock it back and forth till it settles. And we got 309 thousandths. So it's 2 and 309 thousandths. All right, so now we come over to our rod. And we're gonna use our bore mic and we're gonna put it in here. And you always want to check up and down, not side to side, where the gap meets, because it's not a true reading. We got 300, got about 311 thousandths, so it's 2 thousandths of clearance, which is fine. That's perfectly acceptable. So now this one is good, and now we know they're all done. I put a check mark on all of them that I checked. Obviously, I didn't put that one on there yet, but they're all good. They're all within a 2 thousandths clearance for the oil passage, which is fine. You kind of want it to be a little bit bigger than smaller. If you had to decide, you would think you'd want it tighter, but the problem is if it's too tight, just like the crankshaft, if it's too tight, you could have a spun bearing, premature bearing wear. Whereas if it's a little bit more on the loose side, it'll last longer because it's not as tight, and it will allow longevity. So it'll run better in a sense, and it actually makes it cooler, less friction. But you obviously don't want it too loose. Now, when you get to race engines, some of them have 6,000 oil clearances. That's a whole different kind of ball game. They got high pressure, high volume oil pumps and all that. But for a street engine, 2,000, perfectly fine. You could probably even run 3,000 and it would be okay. But 2 is perfect. That's right where we want to be, because the clearance on a Cleveland is 1 to 2.6, I think. So referencing back to the book again, you see right here 72, Cleveland and a 400, same. Come over, and right there is your oil clearance for a connecting rod. You have 1 1/10 to 2 6/10. So we're perfectly fine within that range. But now we got all assembled. This is all torqued down. Now I got to go through, take my rod caps back off so we can get ready to install the pistons finally into the engine. So that'll be on the next video. Stay tuned for that. Alrighty, so we got the rods spec'd and taken care of. We know we're good on oil clearances, so that's good. And if you get a reading that's a little bit off, double check, because I had 1 or 2 that when I first measured it, it was like, I think one was like 1,000ths clearance and another one was like 3,000. And so I just double checked to make sure, and then they came back to be 2,000. So you just got to double check sometimes. You got so many to do. Sometimes if you don't get that bore mic in there just right, or get it just aligned properly when you're reading the measurements, it could throw it off. So make sure that you just take your time, check it. If something don't look right, double check it. Don't always think the worst right away. Double, triple check. I double, triple, and quadruple check my stuff the entire way through this engine build. So don't be afraid to double check. That's all there is for this video. If you like the video, give me a thumbs up. I'd appreciate it. If you're not subscribed, consider subscribing. I'd appreciate it. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, leave them in the drop box down below, and hope you stay tuned to the next video. So until next time, I'll see you on the next one. Take care.